Good morning, everybody. We will get started. Thank you very much for joining us today. Sorry we're a couple of minutes late. I can confirm if you turn up at the venue without your passport, you're going to have to go back to your hotel and back and get it, which takes exactly 43 minutes. I'm Peter Reynolds. I'm the CEO of ThetaRay. I'm delighted to be with you all this morning to talk you through the journey that Jamie and I&M Bank from Kenya are going on. Very briefly about ThetaRay, we help banks and fintechs around the world with growth through compliance, and we're going to talk a bit about that today. But I think most of you are here to listen to and hear from Jamie, and Jamie's the COO of I&M Bank. I got to know I&M Bank a few years ago, and I've been amazed at what they're doing across East Africa, their plans globally, and how much they're focused on modernization and growth. But Jamie, maybe a good time for you to introduce yourself and give us a bit of the story of the bank.
Thanks, Peter. Good morning, everybody. I&M is a bank that just turned 50 years old last year, currently headquartered in Kenya, with subsidiaries in Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and a joint venture in Mauritius. And traditionally, it's a bank that's been focused very much on corporates and businesses, but approximately 3 years ago decided we wanted to pivot into becoming a universal bank and going after the retail market big time. As part of that, we are investing heavily in technology across all aspects of the business, and we've put a huge amount of investment into our digital banking platform, and we are now starting to scale quite significantly. So we're onboarding 20,000 customers a month within Kenya, and the acquisition we made in Uganda is just 2 years old, and we're starting to push to see similar rates of growth there. Overall, as part of our innovation, we see compliance as a significant part of that. It's our license to operate, and so we are really keen to make sure that our investments in our digital banking platform are matched with the investments we're making in compliance.
And maybe a bit about yourself before your time at I&M, your journey to become COO of I&M.
So very briefly, I was a former British Army officer. I spent 16 years in the British military and then moved to Africa now 15 years ago, joining Barclays in Nairobi and then working for Barclays across its sort of stable of African countries until they withdrew from the market back in 2017. And then I briefly had a quick stint back in London before returning to Kenya 4 years ago now to work with one of the other regional banks. But I joined I&M January this year, and it's a very attractive proposition to join given their growth trajectory.
Okay, and let's talk before ThetaRay, like before the challenge you faced in terms of what were you doing in compliance, what was the landscape around payments when you decided you were going to kick off a project?
So I think, like many banks that have, at our sort of stage of growth, you invest in systems maybe 10 years ago and you continue to live with them until your growth starts to really outpace what they can do for you. And for us, we had a very sort of manual and separated approach to the whole AML space. So an individual focus on transaction monitoring and customer screening. And our risk assessment for customers was actually extremely manual. So we didn't really have a holistic picture of the customer. When we look at what we were doing around on the transaction monitoring side, we were in a regulatory regime where we were reporting at T+1, and essentially our system was entirely rules-based. So we were constantly trying to design rules, and I think faced with the same situation that many banks have been faced with, which is you end up with huge amounts of false positives. You do your investigation, you conclude there's nothing suspicious here, and it becomes very inefficient. And as you start to scale, the challenge you face there is you either need to keep on adding more and more people, or you start taking risk with what you're determining is a false positive. And that's very difficult to do with a rule-based system because you don't have that flexibility. And I think the hidden risk is that your costs just start to go up as you start adding people. So we were very keen to identify an approach from a technology perspective that could really represent a paradigm shift for us as we moved away from that model.
We see quite often that when compliance is fragmented, it almost becomes a handbrake on growth rather than enabling it. You talk about 20,000 new customers, not a single view of the customer. That must have led to some pressure from regulators operationally, even customer pressure of onboarding. Like, how did that play out?
Look, it's a huge factor, and I think one of the other important points in our part of the world is so Tanzania and Uganda, where we have subsidiaries, they were on the grey list with FATF, only came off in 2024 and 2025. Kenya, which is our flagship market, is still on the grey list. So at the national level, our regulators are driving a very hard compliance agenda. They are keen to see how are banks able to demonstrate that they are managing their AML risk, because at the national level, in order to attract the sort of foreign direct investment that the country needs, they have to be able to demonstrate that the country is good for business. So there's huge pressure coming from that level, where the regulatory scrutiny is increasing. And I think from a customer perspective, when you have a legacy or legacy technology, then it does start to impact the way you onboard customers and the way they process their payments. So for us, I think particularly around transaction screening, we were having significant delays for customers where payments are being held up. They're calling to complain, why is this a problem? And so you end up in a very manual response cycle to your customers, which is not attractive and doesn't help you to grow. I think the final point I would say is, given we have ambitions to scale across the region, potentially entering new markets as well, we have to get this right. The compliance part of our business has to be enabling us, not holding us back.
Okay, so you're growing. I see more and more compliance and customer journey conversations coming together, and I don't think 5 years ago people would have put them necessarily together. So I think that's a change that I'll come back to. But take a step back. You did a process to look at how you solve these problems. Without this being ThetaRay marketing, what made us stand out in terms of capabilities you were looking for that the market needed?
So I think what we've seen in the banking space generally over the last few years is a growth in machine learning, which is largely managed internally. Certainly when I was at Barclays, there was a huge effort on machine learning as a way of reducing false positives. But I think if you don't have that capability internally, then one of the things you're looking for is what off-the-shelf solutions can we implement that are going to give us that ability. And it's quite an interesting marketplace when you look around. Everybody is claiming they're AI-driven, they're AI-enabled. And you really need to sort of peel under the hood and understand, okay, what does that really mean? And I think for us, there are a couple of aspects that we looked for, which were really important. So ensuring that the AI solution that you're investing in is truly AI, rather than what I'd call AI window dressing.
Sure.
And I think I would define that in the financial crime space. I would define it as that combination of unsupervised and semi-supervised machine learning. So that gives you the ability to really understand anomalies in very large data sets. And I think too often what you'll find is there are solutions on the market that are ultimately rules-based with a little bit of AI on top. And effectively, they look like they're helping you do that, but they're not really proper AI-driven, what I call that unsupervised machine learning that really exposes the anomalies that you're facing from an AML perspective. So that was one. So it's all about, it's AI effectively at the detection level of what your anomaly is. I think the second part is ensuring that the AI that you're using is explainable. Because as you're making your reports to regulators, as you're engaging with customers to say, we've had to stop this transaction or we're holding it whilst we do some analysis, you have to be able to demonstrate why that decision has been made. So having components within the system that give you that explainability, that's extremely important. I think the other point that became very important to us was moving to what I'd call a unified AML approach. So a single solution that is doing all of our named screening, our transaction monitoring, and our customer risk assessment. So those different components inform each other and help develop that holistic picture of risk. And in many ways, it becomes more of an intelligence-led type of approach to AML, where you may have a counterparty in a transaction for trade finance that throws up a link to an existing customer, for example. And within a unified AML suite, those linkages will be thrown up and you can start to analyze them and understand them. So those things were all very important. And ultimately, we wanted to be able to invest in a solution that we felt was going to be future-proof, so that would scale with us as we enter new markets and as our customer growth continues, that's able to grow with us.
So you talked about AI at the detection level, the detection layer, not just on top of on top of false positives, which I get. How do you, and I think this would be interesting to everyone here, how do you make sure that what you're selecting does have real AI? Because from a buyer's point of view, that's something you have to spend a lot of time on.
So I think in our case, we were quite rigorous in terms of the evaluation workshops we did. So before we chose to go with ThetaRay, we narrowed down to 3 vendors.
Sure.
We then went to 2. Those 2 came on site. We did full-day workshops where we really understood how the systems operated. We looked at user interface, experience, and so on. But I think for me, the real proof is in those customer reference calls. So in both cases, we engaged with existing new customers of the solutions, and we got some real-world feedback as to what their experience was. And I think the beauty of that type of investigation is you can ask any question. You always feel the vendor's going to tell you what you want to hear.
Sure.
But when you're talking to someone who's using the solution, you can really ask them, the detailed questions.
The hard ones.
Yeah.
And you talk about customers, you talk about regulators. So to me, I think flexibility, but I also think control. That's typically a gap that's quite hard to manage, that I want absolute control with perfect flexibility. How do you deal with that gap?
So I think that there's a few things from a solution design perspective that help with that. And if we look at what ThetaRay brings for us, we are able to complement what I call the unvarnished AI with our own rules on top, because the nature of our regulatory environment is such that there are things for which we want specific rules, instant detection. So we're able to add that on top. And I think the other thing that's very useful is within the suite, we have a simulator where effectively we can we can tweak our settings in how we want to, the models to run, and then we can run data through it, and we can see what the output is. We can say, okay, now we can see that this is now being flagged as a risk, whereas before it wasn't. And so we have an ability to fine-tune and experiment with how are the AI models detecting and so on. So I think that's very crucial. I think another one for us is just going back to that regulatory pressure. Is again, our regulators are moving to a real-time transaction monitoring requirement.
Yeah.
And for us, and for those that don't know, in East Africa, we are heavily based on mobile money transactions. So for us, approximately 95% of our transactions, about 4.5 million a month, are mobile money transactions. And because that money goes in seconds, it's almost real time, being able to complement that with real-time transaction monitoring is key.
Okay, yes, and I think real-time payments everywhere, but especially in East Africa with M-Pesa, and I think that's where it really took off, is obviously adds challenges. From our point of view, we're going live on screening now. We've got transaction monitoring at the end of the year, customer risk assessment, Q1, very busy. How do you think the teams are working? How have you found the partnership? It's always hard when you bring a new vendor into a bank.
I have to say, I mean, full credit to the ThetaRay team from our perspective. We feel we have real willing partners. So this is not I think we don't see this as a vendor-customer relationship. There is, and I think when you're dealing with very sophisticated sort of machine learning models and so on, there is real expertise within the ThetaRay team, and we're able to reach back to them and discuss how do we tweak models, how do we look at the data that's flowing through. And so from an implementation point of view, we feel we have trusted partners that we can, who we can leverage. And I have to say, it's a very strong relationship. The team are, always available, very easy to reach out to. And I think what's really good is we've been able to tweak aspects of the implementation to suit our particular environment. And for clarity, as I said, we have 4 subsidiaries and 1 joint venture. The legal aspects of that joint venture mean that some of their peculiarities require a slightly different technological solution. So even though we're within one SaaS cloud solution, we've been able to define the data segregation and the sort of the access requirements in such a way that we're very much meeting the different requirements of that unique situation. So I think ultimately there's huge flexibility, there's huge knowledge, and we're very pleased.
Yeah, I think what's impressed us is that partnership, and I think technology being good is one thing, but the best technology without the right people to implement it, especially when you're trying to impact customer journeys, a regulator, real-time payments, explainability, I think it's the partnership is what's very important. And also I think the wider vision you have for the bank around modernization means that people are, your team's bought into where they're going as well.
Yep.
What you never want to do is sell a new system and then the bank say, well, could we implement it like we did the last one? Because, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Something you talked about AI, I think is very important about when you're looking to buy AI, which I understand you need to really make sure it is true AI. Let's move to the outcomes and impact you would expect. Like, what strategically and tactically would you expect to achieve to say that was a good project, good outcome?
So I think you only have to look at the speed with which we're going to be able to declare that we are sort of fully live. So I think we signed, we concluded contracting in June, and we're now going to be live on screening across 4 markets within the next 2 weeks. So I think the speed is significant, and when we look at the step-changing capability from our existing legacy solution, that part is very very positive. The fact that we will also have a unified system across our entire group, that's hugely positive. And I think that knowing that we have proper machine learning models at play, ultimately we will, our risk coverage and our detection is going to be stronger. So I think that's very important. And the experience for our customers will be better. We will not have the same level of delays that we've been experiencing up until now. I think strategically, though, when you look beyond and we look to the future, what it does is it gives us the confidence to scale at the pace that we want, knowing that our AML suite can grow with us. So for us, a key consideration is, what are the new markets we want to enter? And then how quickly can we sort of do that? How quickly can we onboard them? And that may be a physical market entry, or it may be a digital-only market entry. But in either scenario, we have now got a solution that we feel very confident can grow with us. And I think the last point is, again, coming back to this holistic view of risk. So by early next year, we will have integrated risk management across all aspects of AML and financial crime. So transaction and name screening, transaction monitoring, customer risk assessment, all in a unified platform. So that's a huge win for us.
So fragmented legacy, getting rid of that, centralizing everything, unifying intelligence, and then really being able to crank up a growth lever. So then you link that into the vision of growth. So this to you is a growth enablement as well as better risk management, but the ability to grow?
Absolutely, and I think, going back to that point about, we're in this regulatory environment where Kenya is on the grey list, our other subsidiary countries were on the grey list, they're now off. So being able to demonstrate very clearly to regulators that we are very confident in the quality of our detections, the reports that we're making, that's huge, because suddenly compliance now becomes a competitive advantage where we can say to the regulator, look, you come and review whatever you want as frequently as you want, because we now have confidence in the solution that we've deployed. And I think having that level of confidence then becomes an enabler for innovation, because knowing that as we tweak our digital banking platform, potentially for new market entry, the ease with which we're integrated from an AML point of view just gives us confidence that we can move forward in the way that we want to.
Do you find with the regulator, we find globally regulators becoming very pro-AI, very much looking for these solutions. It's no longer 5 years ago, it was a bit of an uphill struggle, I think. Do you find they come with the knowledge, or do you still think you are educating them about, you talked about explainability early. Are they asking for it and you're having to educate them what it means, or do they know what they're looking for?
It's interesting that, they have, they very much see AI as something that is required to help transform not just the country, but also the continent. And if you compare and contrast the African Union's AI strategy, the Kenya national strategy, if you compare that to the sort of regulation and output you're seeing in Europe, it's very different. Europe is much more geared towards an enforcement model and concerns about risk. Regulators certainly in Africa are very much seeing AI as a significant enabler for national transformation. So they are less concerned about risk, but they like the fact that the bank is coming to them to say, look, we want to make sure that you understand and we can explain this because we see it as a risk. There's a very subtle difference in what I call the sort of Western-centric approach to AI at the regulatory level and what we're seeing in Africa.
And what about teams? As you hire people, you bring new talent into the bank, which is something that I know you're very focused on. Is there an expectation with the kind of younger people you're bringing into the bank that you'll be working with AI tools? Like, is this something they want?
Very much so. I think certainly, we are, we as I said, I think we've added 450 staff so far this year. So again, the customer growth and the employee growth is being matched. So I regularly talk to our new staff who've joined, and it's a frequent topic of conversation is how can they use AI? What tools is the bank going to be deploying to support them? And certainly figuring out how we do that is quite a challenge. But this is the new way. I mean, I think we have to embrace that.
And looking forward, anything innovative, like innovation you're looking at? What's exciting you? I know I often see you traveling around the world to events like this. What's piquing your interest at the moment?
Well,
apart from compliance.
Apart from compliance. So I think, sticking with the AI theme, I think we are starting to look at how do we use agentic and intelligent orchestration of AI to completely transform our operations space. So we can take an existing customer journey and completely reimagine it. I think too often banks fall into the trap of what I call siloed automation. So they go department by department. How do I fix that, automate that? Rather than saying, now that we have these tools and this technology, how do we take this customer journey and reimagine it end to end by combining humans, robots, traditional RPA, but also AI agents? And I think that combination is hugely exciting. And the good thing about being in a growing organization is this is not a conversation about job displacement and making people redundant. This is now a conversation about how do we get more of our staff into conversations with customers where empathy is important, where nuanced judgment's important, and we're able to do that because we've actually done a huge amount of sort of AI-led automation at the back end. So I think outside of compliance, that's quite an exciting journey.
It's interesting because I think you've seen these three stages. Compliance was originally about avoiding fines, then it became about lowering costs, and now it's become about net driving growth. And what's interesting about your kind of AI-powered journey is that East Africa's had a lot of competition in the payment space from fintechs. You might even argue that, until you started this journey, an I&M customer wouldn't be, the go-to choice might be M-Pesa to make a payment. So if you don't do all of these things, and if you don't have people talking to customers, if you don't understand the customer journey, how are you ever going to compete? So it's kind of like forced you into a position where you have to bring innovation. Is that fair to say?
No, I think it is. And interestingly, I think M-Pesa will remain a hugely important part of our landscape. So for us, the challenge is how do we innovate as a bank in a way that we can thrive in that ecosystem rather as a partner, not just as a competitor. And I think certainly when you look at the innovation in mobile money space, banks being part of that is absolutely key.
Sure, and I know you work very closely with them already. You have to coexist across the payment ecosystem, especially in Africa.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. We are coming up to time. Thank you very much, Jamie. Been fascinating hearing your journey. Any closing comments?
No, I think it's always a good conversation. Delighted to be able to share some of our local insights with people here, and very happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, we will hang around if there are any questions people have, but thank you very much for your time.